Dear participants, dear speakers, on behalf of Autonomous Educational Organization, Nazarbayev Intellectual Schools, let me welcome you to the next annual 12th International Conference of NIS. This year, the topic of the conference is the family, school, and community, thinking and acting for a child. As you know, the partnership of family, school, and the community, all these three stakeholders, is very important in ensuring and creating high quality and safe educational environment. This session is devoted to the ensuring safety and well-being at the school through international accreditation. In this session, our speakers will share their perspective, how to ensure well-being safeguarding at the schools through these international accreditation practices. Dear conference participants, you can write your questions in our chat. Then at the end of the session, we will try to answer all the questions. So the first speaker is Dr. Simon Camby, Director of CIS School Evaluation and Development. Previously, Mr. Camby worked at Cognita, where he led a transformational agenda across the organization, pursuing and achieving high performance strategically and operationally. Mr. Camby, dear Simon, you are given 12 minutes for your speech. Please share your presentation.
Hello everyone, it's absolutely brilliant to be with you and we're really honoured to be part of your conference today. I actually joined CIS in March this year, and since joining the Council of International Schools, I've heard so much positive talk about your schools, and I only just wait for the day when actually I can come and visit some of your schools, because that just sounds the most amazing thing to do. So thank you very much for inviting us. As Indira said, we're focusing particularly on this idea of community, and later on in this session, some other colleagues will focus very specifically on safeguarding and student well-being. But what I would like to do in the first part of this session is focus on the idea of community and just spend a few minutes with you thinking through the way we think about community through the lens of CIS International Accreditation. And community is really important, obviously, in every school, and it's very, very important within the CIS model of accreditation. So I hope this is useful for you, but please do ask any questions if you are unsure about anything that I say. So I thought to start with, I would like to just stand back and think a little bit about the CIS model of accreditation and what we are aiming to do, because this is ultimately connected to your community. So the first thing that we really want to know when we are thinking about accreditation is, what do you say you will do? And why do you do it? And in a way, the way I think about that is they are the promises that you make to your school community. Now, every school is different, every school is distinctive, it has its own culture and context. And what we want to know is, what do you say to your community you offer, and why is your school different than another school? The second aspect is then to say, well, okay, you've made some promises. Do you deliver those promises? Do you do what you say you will do? And then the third thing is, having done all of that, how do you know and how do you show that it makes a difference for the children in your care? Okay, so what do you promise? Do you do it? And does it make a difference? And then the underpinning aspect of all of that, which is really important to us at CIS, is, do you do that in an ethical way? Do you do the right thing for your school community? Okay, so that's the big picture of CIS. And that really roots in the promises that you make to your school community. And the way it works at CIS is that everything really that we do with accreditation starts with the idea of what we call guiding statements. Other people may not call them guiding statements, but that's the language we use. And guiding statements just means the things that you write down that you promise to your community. And the reason those guiding statements are so important in accreditation is that when evaluators visit your school, they will start with your guiding statements. They will say, what do you promise to your community? It's almost like a contract that you make with your community. And it may not be a legal contract, though in some schools it is, but actually it is a promise to your community. Okay, so that's the big picture of accreditation, all starting with your promise to your community. What I'd like to do now is just spend a few minutes, and I've focused only on 4 ways that community is very important. There are other ways, and I could have focused on many things here, but I picked the 4 things that I think are really important. So the first thing, I've mentioned guiding statements. So why are guiding statements important here? Well, what matters with guiding statements is that when you are developing them, you aim to involve your community. So they are not developed by 3 or 4 people sitting in a dark room. They are developed by working with your community to understand the things that your community might want or might need. Now, that doesn't mean you can offer everything to them, because you have to be very clear about what you can and cannot offer. However, they are developed and reviewed with members of your community. Of course, that can't be every member of your community, but that you try your hardest to make sure that you have different voices involved in the development and in reviewing them. And then the most important thing through CIS international accreditation that evaluators will test out is, are your guiding statements lived out? And if you're a school leader, they may not ask you that, but they certainly will be talking to students and to parents and teachers and other members of the community. So what's really important is that your guiding statements go out throughout the whole of your community. They're not something that's just on the wall, maybe as you come into your school's entrance. They are lived by everybody in the community. So guiding statements are really, really important within CIS. The second aspect that I just want to focus on briefly is the idea of self-study. Okay, and some of your schools will have engaged in self-study and some won't have just yet. And when we talk about self-study, it's the period of time between your preparatory evaluation and your team evaluation. And this is usually about 12 or maybe 18 months. And it's a really important time, because it's the time when a school takes a really good look at itself. It's like looking in a very big mirror and saying, what are we good at? What are the things we do really, really well? And you know what? There are some areas where we can get better. There are some areas where we can improve, not because we're failing, but because schools can always improve and teachers can always improve. It's never ending. And the reason the self-study is so important for us is, well, it's important because we think that being reflective and reviewing is really important. And there is so much international evidence that helps us to know that great schools are very reflective. But there's another reason. And the other reason is, for us, a self-study is about community involvement. Because if we didn't have the self-study, CIS international accreditation could perhaps just be completed by the school leaders. And that isn't the CIS model. The CIS model is an inclusive model about including as many people as possible. And that looks different in every school. And the reason that's important is because we know, I was going to say believe, but actually we know that that builds capacity in schools. That makes schools stronger because more people are involved. So it's more than just the leadership team. So ultimately, self-reflection or self-review is at the heart of the CIS accreditation process. The third aspect that I just want to focus on is what we call the community survey. And the community survey actually takes place as part of your self-study. And this is the point in time where we use a survey to take feedback from people around the community. So we ask lots of different people. So teachers and students and support staff and wider members of the community. And we ask them for feedback on the school. And why do we do that? Because it matters to hear different voices. The most important part of that is then the reflection that you do as a school to say, okay, we've heard lots of voices. What did we learn? What are the great pieces of feedback that we got that can help to improve our school? So the community survey is so important. And by the way, if you don't know this, some schools just use the community survey as part of their accreditation cycle. But many schools use it every single year. And if that's helpful to you, any CIS accredited school can use the survey every year. So that may be something that could be helpful with your ongoing school improvement, not just your preparation for accreditation. And then the final aspect of community that I've focused on is what I've called the global community of educators. And of course, one of the things that makes CIS very distinctive is that when people visit your school for the team evaluation, they haven't come from the CIS office. They have come from schools around the world. They are international educators just like you. And the value of that is that it leads to what I've called reciprocal learning. So in other words, they are learning and you are learning. So it makes learning cyclical, it goes round. And what's great is that every time an evaluator visits a school, they learn, and hopefully they leave the school in a better place. So that means that being part of the CIS international community, it means you're part of a global community that is ultimately shaping the future of international education. So that idea of educators peer evaluating other schools and the work of other educators is very much part of the CIS approach. So I hope that that gives you a flavour of some of the ways that we see community, but this isn't just a belief we have, it's the way that we build it in to the CIS international accreditation process. I hope that's helpful for you. If anything is unclear, please use the Q&A function today, or please just reach out to me if you would like a separate conversation or if I can help you with anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camby. That was very interesting. And I would like to outline that we have been working with CIS for about 5 years already. And we notice how CIS promote the well-being and pay attention to the questions, issues of safety at school. Thus, for example, in 2019, the protocol was changed. The accreditation standards were revisited, and the well-being issue were outlined with different domain. That was actually very, very due time, I think, and very good for the schools who work with CIS. Thank you very much, Mr. Camby. If participants have any questions, please write them in the chat, and we will try to cover all of them at the end. So the next word is given to PhD researcher of Faculty of Education at Cambridge University, Ms. Raquel Scarpa Guevara. Ms. Raquel, you have 12 minutes, and I would like to say that Ms. Raquel visited our schools, and she knows the NIS schools not only from the website, but she saw them herself as a team member, if I'm not mistaken. So, Raquel, you have 12 minutes to share your ideas on best practices for supporting the interest of students. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Indira, and a huge warm welcome to everyone watching. As Indira mentioned, I had the immense privilege of going to Kazakhstan in 5 different moments in 5 different regions, and I fell in love with your country. I fell in love with the education reform that is happening there and with the NIS system. So because of you, I shifted my own career and went to the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge to do research in education reform. So I could go on in saying how much I have learned from you, picking up on what Simon just said, in this global community, and how much I admire your work and the work that you are making a huge difference to the lives of so many children and indeed an entire country. But Indira has only given me 12 minutes, so I'm going to share my screen. Before, I would just like to say I prepared a presentation. I will only use today a few slides, but I prepared it in a way that for you to refer back to it as a resource. So the slides are heavy in text on purpose because it is supposed to be used later on for you to refer back to the text. I am now going to select a few slides and talk to you about some major aspects that I think are relevant today. So here we are. I have my segment, as Indira pointed out, is on best practices for supporting the interests of students in intellectual international schools. I would like to contribute from 2 perspectives. One perspective as a CIS accreditation chair, which I would ask the question, what systems and structures can support ongoing reflection on how best to serve the interest of students. The second perspective I would like to share here today.
Sorry if you can hear translation.
And I would like to offer a reflection on what is the link between well-being and learning, and what are the implications of that for school evaluation models. So the first segment, I want to share a few of the best practices that make up systems and structures which support ongoing deep reflection on how to best serve the interest of students. For this part, I want you to keep in mind that my premise is well-being is connected to child safeguarding, which is connected to a risk assessment. And I'm going to propose a reflection on this topic, and which is based on the 4 standards of international child safeguarding that are available. The general principles that the international child safeguarding standards are based on are these listed there. So the first one is that all children have equal rights to protection from harm. The second one is that everyone has a responsibility to support the protection of children. Then the third one is organizations have a duty of care to the children with whom they work, are in contact with, or who are affected by their activities and operations. The next one, if organizations work with partners, they have the responsibility to help the partners meet minimum requirements of child protection. And the last one is all actions on child safeguarding are taken always in the best interest of the child, which are paramount. So I offer here a few questions to guide. These questions are very powerful. I'm going to read through them with you to support an ongoing, honest, open, and systematic reflection of what this is about. So let's start. What, when, and how your organization affects children, and what risks this presents. What policies and procedures are needed to prevent harm, and how to respond to concerns appropriately. Who is the appropriate designated person to act as a focal point in the organization to receive and manage any safeguarding concerns and subsequent injury investigation? Now, I would like to focus on this next point, which is a new one that is emerging. What is the overall ethos, culture of care in your organization? For example, What practices, provisions are there for caring for the well-being of adults, teachers, administrative staff? The next one is, what safeguarding, induction, and training is needed to ensure staff know what the organization expects of them and what to do if they have a concern? Is there a clear code of conduct so that all staff understand their professional boundaries when working with children and what is and is not acceptable behavior? How do you recruit safely? So I'm going to move on now to the second part. As I said, please refer back to my slides. There's a lot of text there to help support the analysis. In this segment here now I'm going to shift change my hat, as they say, right? And I'm going to share with you latest research on the link between social emotional skills, psychosocial competencies, and learning outcomes. But I'm coming from a premise that student well-being is connected to social emotional learning. And I'll propose a reflection on the following question. How can we incorporate these latest findings in education research into our evaluation and accreditation models? I have to warn you that I propose questions, but I don't necessarily answer them. And this is intentional because I'm coming from a CIS perspective and model that we encourage reflection. We encourage all voices. So if we give an answer, you're closing reflection. If we give a question, you're opening reflection. So the main points that I would like to make is that it's very well known and very well documented that skills such as self-efficacy, work ethic, self-confidence have a major impact on educational performance and broader life outcomes. We know that social emotional skills can be developed, can be learned through a process known as social emotional learning. We have a really interesting result of a study called the Asian American Achievement Paradox, and also the gender gap in achievement, that has shown that social emotional skills can be an important explanation for learning differences. So what, we ask each other, how do we incorporate this knowledge into evaluation and accreditation models? Because good models for school evaluation and accreditation are typically research informed. And I think it's including the aspect of asking ourselves, how can we do even better? So I'm going to, in the next slides, what I did, and I'm not going to read them, but I prepared them for you to refer back. I compiled a lot of research and findings in this link between social emotional skills, learning outcome, with the premise that this is a major part of student well-being. So I'm going to stop on this one just as an example, the Asian American paradox. So the finding here that these authors had is that in the United States, Asian Americans outperform all other ethnic groups, even when we control for family background and a range of other structural characteristics. The authors offer two forms of analysis on this fact, that the achievement advantage is largely explained by their stricter work ethic, which in turn results from a cultural belief that effort rather than ability is primary source of success. And also that having been raised with a growth mindset themselves, they impart to their children the message that extra effort will yield greatest chance that they will attain success. So the reflection is there's a culturally determined growth mindset, and I would invite you to carry a reflection yourselves later in how does the Kazakhstani culture fit into this type of analysis. So I think that an important aspect here is all of this research that I'm sharing with you in the slides, that I would please invite you to go back and read the summary of those studies and their findings later. All of them, the effect sizes in the education research depend on the effectiveness of what is done in the classroom. In other words, the teacher is at the heart of it all. So if student well-being is linked to social emotional learning, how can an organizational culture of well-being help boost this outcome? So how can we rethink teacher learning in light of the evidence that we know about student learning that I've just shared some with you? Can teacher professional growth include teacher well-being? Because then we are talking about an ethos of well-being, an organizational culture of well-being. How can it be incorporated into evaluation models to help guide school improvement through student well-being? So my main conclusions here is that there is a link in this chain of social emotional learning, student well-being, learning outcomes, and school improvement. There's lots of data on that, and I did share some here with you. Please go back and read it. How can we incorporate the different parts of this puzzle in school evaluation models, such as an international accreditation? Teacher professional development has a powerful ripple effect on this, impacting student well-being at the heart. So amplifying the space for teacher well-being in accreditation standards could be a really interesting opportunity for us to pursue. And a further reflection is, should teacher well-being be incorporated to teacher professional growth and teacher support indicators in school evaluation tools? I will leave you with these questions. My final word here is we are living in a post-pandemic world, which is also a post-climate change Greta Thunberg world, a post-Me Too world, a post-Black Lives Matter world. These global events connect to our notion of well-being. How did these events shift the boundaries of our duty of care? What used to be the boundary of how far can we go for the duty of care has been expanded and shifted because of these movements that our young students are really connected with. I do have to say that here at Cambridge, we have a collegial system. There are 31 colleges as part of the university. And I want to close by saying the importance of the Shanarak system in the NIS schools. The NIS is exactly on the right path for sustainable well-being provision through this robust pastoral care. I commend you immensely for that. And I would like to invite you all to reflect on how can we extend this excellent provision. I have included all the resource that I used, and I am on the app for the conference. Please send me a message if you would like to chat more.
Thank you very much, Raquel. That was very interesting presentation and with a lot of resources. Yeah, I see that the issue of well-being is deeply researched by you, social-emotional learning, and the way how you connect it with the learning outcomes is very interesting. And I think that the participants, if they study the materials more deeply, will find a lot of resources that can be used in the practice here at school. Thank you very much, Raquel, for your presentation, for your time. Katie Rick, the head of safeguarding and student well-being at CIS, will share her perspective on students' voices and safety. Katie's primary responsibility is to help CIS and schools and university members to keep children and young people safe and to support and strengthen their mental health and well-being. So Katie will talk about this topic about 12 minutes. And now we would like to share a video, a short video. Okay, Katie, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Indira, and thank you for inviting me to speak. As Simon and Raquel said, it's a real privilege to be able to deliver a session for you all today. And I've been at CIS for 3 years, and I haven't yet had the opportunity to work with any of your schools. So I really hope that that opportunity does arise soon. So Indira asked me to speak about quite a specific topic, which is how do schools engage with students on the topics of child safeguarding and well-being? So how do you talk to students about it? How do you learn from your students about it? And how do you consult with your students about it? And the importance of doing this is really touches on what both Simon and Raquel have talked about. So it's about building community. It's about ensuring that what you do is relevant for your students. So asking their opinion on what you teach, for example, in safeguarding. But it's also about measuring the impact of the interventions and the policies that you put in place. Before sharing my screen, I just wanted to explain that a lot of the research that I'm going to be talking about is carried out by the International Task Force on Child Protection, which is a group of accreditation bodies and search agencies, recruitment agencies, government agencies. They all came together in 2014 to really, with the sole aim of helping international schools to become safer for children. And they set the sort of broad, high-level child safeguarding standards, which sit above the CIS framework and the CIS protocol. So I will just share a few slides. As Simon said, well-being and safeguarding it really sort of runs throughout the CIS framework. Well-being is one of the 4 drivers. There are 10 standards in the CIS framework which talk about child safeguarding and well-being in particular, and domain E is the main domain. So for those of you who have a copy of the CIS framework with you, you'll see those standards in there. There's another document which might be helpful, and if you don't have access to it already, I can share it with Indira afterwards, which is a guidance. It's called Safeguarding Guidance for Evaluators, and it really breaks down the standards in the CIS framework that relate to safeguarding and talks about what an evaluator will look for when they go into the school and what it really means in practice. In terms of the research that the task force has carried out, I think I just also wanted to say before I sort of delve into it that this is a really difficult topic for a lot of schools. Lots of schools are very good at student voice and agency when it comes to general areas of school life, but they get quite nervous about talking to schools about such sensitive topics around child safeguarding, and rightly so. And so I focused on these areas because they're the ones that schools struggle with the most. But a word of caution, which is that when you're doing some of this work with your students, you need to be really careful that you're not going to cause harm to the students. There is a resource which is being developed, which will be available shortly by the task force, which will help you to think before you start some of these exercises about things like consent, confidentiality, anonymity. How do you handle it? Disclosures, if a student discloses while you're talking to them, all of these sorts of things which you really need to consider before doing any of these activities, and that will be available really shortly. So we did a survey with the task force of 94 school leaders across 48 different countries, asking them what they did with their students to engage them on some of these topics. And here you see some of the ways that the schools engage students generally. Student council is the main way that schools promote student agency, with student surveys falling closely behind. On student surveys, we've talked to a number of students through focus groups and other means about this, and they all say that—
Katie, could you please speak a little bit slower?
That they get surveys all the time, and that what they're concerned about is that the school, they don't ever see any noticeable change after giving feedback in a survey. And so just one thing to bear in mind is, like, if you are going to do a survey, to think really carefully about how you're going to act on that data. They also said that they found surveys quite impersonal and they would prefer discussions sometimes. And they would also prefer teachers to just ask them if they're okay, rather than always sending out a survey. So I think surveys are really great and they're a cornerstone of sort of student voice, but you just have to think carefully about it. At least 1 in 3, but probably more, of the respondents said that they didn't have a child protection or safeguarding policy that was in a student-friendly format. So they didn't have one that was accessible to students. And this came out of our discussions with students as well, because they said that they would never talk to a teacher or a counsellor if they were worried because they didn't know what was going to happen, and safeguarding was quite a mystery to them. They said it sort of, they didn't understand what would happen afterwards. And so talking to your students as you're thinking about what you're going to do and explaining that to them can be really helpful because it can encourage them to come forwards. When we asked the leaders about things that worked well on Student Voice, they highlighted 3 key things. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to go into each of these. So survey on wellbeing and safeguarding practices. There are lots of excellent evidence-based wellbeing surveys out there, and it's important that you tailor it to your community. I'm sure that you have one that you use already. The difference with the contextual safeguarding student voice, student wellbeing survey is that it incorporates questions around child protection and bullying, but also sexual harm, and it does so in an age-appropriate way. And so I can share this template afterwards if you're interested in incorporating some of those questions. But when you do surveys, also thinking about having your students help you to design it and pilot it, and thinking about how often you're going to repeat it, and also anonymity, which I can talk more about if people have questions. Something interesting that often comes out of surveys is students say that there are locations in the school where they don't feel safe. So another activity that you can do is mapping. So you can take a map of the school campus and you can ask your students to rate where they feel safe, green, where they feel unsafe, red, and where it's sort of in between, amber. And so on this example, the students said that they felt unsafe in the music room, and that was because there were some heavy curtains, and behind that there was a lot of sexual harassment that was happening, and so that alerted to the school to that, and then they removed the curtains and made it a safer place. You can also sit down with students and do peer-on-peer abuse mapping, which is where you ask them what are the different forms of harm that their friends are experiencing related to both online but also in person. So here on the right, you see the results of an engagement session that I carried out with a researcher from the University of Bedfordshire. And we spoke to international school students in a whole range of different international schools across 3 different continents. And it was really interesting hearing what they had to say. The activity on the left is mapping sexual harm. So these icons will be familiar to a lot of students. The broken heart is coercive behavior. So if your partner is telling you what to wear, who to see, the flame is rating, sexually rating students. The aubergine is pressure to send sexual images. The hand is unwanted touching. The cherry is for someone forcing you to carry out a sexual act, including oral sex. And the students were asked to rate on a continuum from never to all the time how often these things were happening in school. And you can see that from this example, the students said that a lot of the harm was happening almost all the time, so on a weekly basis in school. The researchers then asked the parents of those students, how many of you think that you would know if your child was experiencing sexual harm at school? And 100% of the parents said that they thought they would know if their child was experiencing sexual harm. And we often find that there's a discrepancy between what the children and the students are experiencing and what the parents and the staff think they're experiencing. The final activity is student reference groups, which is getting a small group of students, 5 or 6 by age, and talking to them about a number of these things, asking them questions. The task force carried out 6 reference groups across 3 schools and 2 continents. And these are some of the questions that they asked. They did it with students from ages 10 and 11, and this is the results that they gave, and they also did it with older students. And they said, what does safeguarding mean to you? And that can be helpful in letting you know what your students' understanding is of it, if they've been talked to about it, if they have any awareness of it. You can also ask your students, what's working? Like, how does our school keep you safe? And here are some of the examples that the students gave, which just highlight some of the strengths. And then you can ask them to rate on a scale of to what extent they agree with a number of statements. So here the student said, this sort of threw up some helpful information. The student said they wouldn't talk to anyone on the posters because they don't know them. And so really the importance of talking to students about how they can reach out to anyone in school, not just someone on the posters. And then here it's really the point around, if you're going to ask students for feedback, making sure that you act on that and giving them and letting them know what you're doing. This is a helpful document which is on the community portal and I can share afterwards, which includes a lot more information about this. And as I say, the International Task Force is shortly going to publish a resource which will help you to carry out some of these activities. If any of you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat or ask them afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was a very interesting presentation, and all the issues of well-being were covered. That was done by the task force. The resources, we will be waiting from you, all the links or downloaded files, how to get them. I see that that school mapping, where they feel safe, is a very good actually practice that can be adapted to NIS schools as well. Thank you very much, Katie. We will be waiting for the questions from our participants. And now we will give our word to our fourth presenter. Unfortunately, due to the health issues, our fourth presenter couldn't join the conference today, but his deputy director replaced him. So Mahrip Altaybekova is the deputy director of NIS in Nur-Sultan. That school is one of the first schools that were accredited by CIS, and the first school that is joining the reaccreditation under the new CIS protocol. So the topic is a high quality learning and student well-being as one of the key drivers of international accreditation. Mahripa, söz sizге беріледі.
Аталмыш мектеп 2016 жылы халықаралық мектептер кеңесі аккредитациясынан.
My today topic is called the idea of CIS international accreditation. Let me develop this topic in two ways. What were the topics of today? And the international protocol of GIS is providing the structured methodology to develop the systematic continuous improvement of the schools. And the topic of my today report is high quality learning and student well-being as one of the key drivers of the international accreditation. First of all, it's about the student learning process. If the nature and the quality of student learning is providing the academic achievements. As far as you may see, the main topic is the high quality learning and students' well-being as one of the key drivers of international accreditation. So let me share the characteristics for the teaching process. This is the basis of the protocol because the nature and quality of students' learning, as well as the projects they make as a result of their learning, are at the heart of the protocol. The students' learning should be at the center of any school performance assessment process. That's why experts spend time in the classroom and in order to provide the context of student learning, talk with parents and staff. And in order to have a reliable foundation for the effective and high quality education, every student must stay safe and protected. CIS attaches great importance to how students are protected through child protection and safety measures taken by the school. It's all provided in each protocol of CIS accreditation process. This is the way, the purpose and direction, providing the guiding provisions that show a commitment to well-being that complies with the CIS Code of Ethics and the values of UN Convention on the Rights and Protection of Children. Regarding the management, the school principal is an educational leader who fulfills the mission and responsible for the learning and well-being of students. Regarding the curriculum, it helps to develop knowledge and understanding, skills and qualities, including well-being and cross-cultural competences appropriate to age characteristics of students. Regarding teaching and assessment process, the teaching meets the school's definition of high-quality teaching and gives the efficient processes and politics stipulated in place to guide the needs and well-being of learners. Regarding the well-being, the school environment is characterized by openness, honesty, trust, and mutual respect to support student learning and well-being. And the school listens to students' voices, of course. There are documented written policies to protect students and get their feedback. Here, I would like to speak about the F standard. The school provides continuous professional development of teachers and support staff based on the professional needs of teachers and improves learning, being, and global citizenship. The G standard is stipulating the information on territory and material and technical base. The school maintains its territory and facilities, support systems and services to support the mission and curriculum, and also contributes to the well-being of students. The standard H is giving us the standard on partnership. The effective communication fosters productive homeschool community cooperation and the creation of a positive educational environment. The residency, either boarding school and family residence, is when we organize education and ensure the well-being of students. The boarding school and/or family accommodation are taken into account while providing compliance with the mission and vision. The high-quality teaching and learning in the Nazarbayev intellectual schools are providing the following aspects, such as curriculum, additional educational courses, our concerns for the welfare of students, safety of our students, education of national and personal values, criteria-based assessment system we have, and learning and teaching process are based on the IB concepts. Also, we provide personalized education, and teaching and learning are focused on the learner. Our curricula is provided through the following prism. First of all, we take into consideration the student's voice, the national educational needs, pedagogical judgments, external expert feedback, and personalized learning that we provide. This is about flexibility. Also, we would like to reveal all the sides of the process, the weak and strong points. We provide the constructive consistency, incorporating objective goals, concepts, global contexts. And also, regarding the functional literacy, we develop ATL skills, language policy, and we provide differentiation, different phases by language, by format of assessment, and also we provide the integration basing on social sciences, and children should be differentiated basing on the language spoken, and we always based on the scientific evidence. And as we are providing our additional educational courses, we provide in the 7th form the history of Kazakhstan, and in the 10th form they get it as a separate subject. And in the 7th form they get such subjects like chemistry and biology as an integrated studies. And in the 9th and 10th form, the sciences will be split into chemistry, physics, and biology, individual subjects. And there is a separate discipline on economy and the world history and anthropology. First, they're provided in the integrated subjects, but then in the 9th and 10th form, they are taught as a separate subjects. And then they are provided as additional education. And also, regarding our additional educational course through the PRISM, we take into consideration the needs. First of all, choosing a circle, creating a new team, and we build the work basing on the individual portrait of a student. And also, here we provide the diversity. We have different directions in sports, in the creativity, languages, technical aspects, and also regarding the performance, we engage the participation in different festivals, competitions, and IB exams, for instance, for bachelor's degree. And also we provide the national identity and intercultural awareness. We provide the education as an additional subjects in the sphere of music, such as dombra playing, togus, kumalak. We have UN Club and the roundtable debates, and also we arrange intercultural festivals. And also, let me share the politics on well-being of students. So we incorporate student self-governance, openness, fairness, trust, and mutual respect. Also, we provide protect and promotion of the well-being of all the students. We provide the opportunity for all students to participate and be a part of school committees. And also there is an initiative in the different additional training courses. Also, we have rules and procedures stipulated in places. And now, when we speak about the students' protection policy, we are taking into consideration the student mental health and safeguarding first. Also, we provide medical services. We have safety and health engineers, lawyers, and inspectors. And also, we have a pedagogical council for that. Thank you very much, dear Margaripa, for your presentation. And now,
a lot of good recommendations, a lot of good words about the session, and I have some questions to our speakers. Katie, the first question is to you, if you can switch your camera on. So the question sounds like, what has changed at schools in ensuring well-being and safeguarding after almost 2-year academic pandemic situation and lockdown at schools? Your opinion. what has changed dramatically or drastically?
In safeguarding and well-being as a result of the
Yes.
pandemic. I mean, lots of things. It's a great question that I think we could talk for hours about. I think one of the main things which Raquel will also be able to talk to is how well-being has moved up the list of priorities in terms for leaders globally, and that's in schools, but also we see that in universities as well. So it's much more important now, and it's seen as more important in lots of schools. That in itself has then triggered lots of changes. So lots more schools are doing things like, you know, what I've talked about, or what Raquel has talked about in terms of social emotional learning. So there's a lot more of that. I think there's obviously the whole online element as well. And schools had to learn really quickly in lockdown how to safeguard students who are learning online. And so there's been huge sort of acceleration and advancement in that area, which covers, you know, a whole host of things related to security and how do students report online, how can you make sure that a student is okay if you're only seeing them online. All of these sorts of things I think have got much better.
Thank you very much, Katie. Indeed, this issue was important before, but now it became much more important.
Exactly.
So well-being, not only students, but well-being of the parents as well, the family members, because they also were affected by the online, by the lockdown, and so on. Thank you very much, Katie. Yes, I do agree that this topic might be discussed for a long hours. So the next question is, Raquel, for you. What is the perception of well-being issues at Kazakhstan schools? Well, I guess that they talk about NAS, yes, and overseas schools. The perception of well-being issues. How do students or people here and there? How do they perceive?
I think that it links a lot with what, the question that Katie has just answered. I think the perception was. CIS had a really important role in aligning some perceptions. I think when we visited schools, I had the privilege of going to the first that you just introduced, Magripa. So I was part of the team of accrediting that first school, and I was part of the last one also. And I think that before the pandemic, having this international collegial peer assessment was a really important thing for the NIS system, for them to see what they were actually doing great, what they were surprised to see how, for example, the Shanraks. The Shanraks is a system of robust pastoral care that you have a professional with a smaller group of students, and you can be tuned into their well-being much better. However, the pandemic flipped the system way more, and I think that the NIS perception is even more closer to what is happening everywhere in the world. Suddenly, and just adding to what Katie said, we all recognize that there was a limit to what we could technologically do to protect students. And I think that a huge gain that I saw also in Kazakhstan was that it's okay to say, we don't know how to do this. Another thing that came to the forefront now is the well-being of teachers. So the thing is, it's really hard for you to safeguard and be worried about the well-being of students if this is not role modeled by the entire organization. And in the entire world, what happened was no one knew how to do this. And the health of teachers it really broke. So we had to all learn and look at the teacher also. And then that suddenly became part of student well-being. So I think I hope I answered it.
Yes, indeed. That is also very, the question that requires a long time on discussion and thinking. Thank you very much, all the speakers. On behalf of our organization, I would like to extend our gratefulness for your joining, for finding the time, and very fruitful presentation. At least I am, as a principal for one of the NIS, from this 1 hour, I think I got a lot of information that can be introduced at the school on the practical level. Thank you very much. I know that the issue of well-being might be discussed for long hours, but we were limited only with 1 hour. That is why please share all your materials and some guidance for evaluators, which will be invaluable actually for us. That is why. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.